Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 2, Chapter 4, the Ganaada's Curse. And this is, as typical in this part of the book, the chapter is very short, so we will be continuing on to Chapter 5. Oh, did I really do this? There's a fuck up in the... So it's going to be Chapter 5, even though in the book it says Chapter 4, Imprisoned. We will be getting to that one also. So, I hope you've been enjoying this deep dive into the psyche and personal life of the woman in gray, the bad guy, the character we've seen very little of in person, but have heard a lot about. I've only seen her in person just a few scenes, and that's typical with me. Usually my main villains, I don't tip my hand too much with them. You don't see them that often. There are notable exceptions, but I like them to be more of like a force of nature or a concept rather than just a flesh and blood person. It makes them seem more of a force than something that you necessarily can't overcome. You just have to endure or deal with. And we see how she became the Fiend of Calvert, mostly looking for men that she could take over by having sex with them and enslave to her will. But then she developed a taste for killing also, so she would kill some of the men instead of enslaving them, and became the Fiend of Calvert, hiding in plain sight, using her gynology skills, or as her skills as a master gynologist, to fool all the evidencers and people coming down to discover the truth pertaining to the crimes. She didn't have it all her way, though. Lord Gerald Catherbaum, a very prominent Calvert, hired, paid for out of his own coin, the Vigilant from the north, the Mad Lord of Walther. And the Mad Lord smoked her out, killed her slave men, and almost killed her too. She had to flee across the rooftops of Calvert. And as we know, she fled across Lord Aram's townhouse. He was just right there. He lived in the top floor of the townhouse, underneath, the attic, basically. And there was just a little bit of wood framing and copper between the Fiend of Calvert and Aram as a kid. And then she flees off-world to Bazz. And I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but the ship that she took to go to Bazz was the Westminster, the one that they're using right now as a drive engine. You see that people and machinery, when the Bazz Circle Curse begins, all get sort of mixed in and jumbled up with each other. And I mistakenly said last week that we would see the genesis of the Bazz Circle Curse in real time. But no, it's this week, in this chapter, Chapter 4, the Ganaada's Curse. We're going to see it kick off with full force. Let's begin 2 chapters. Chapter 4, the Ganaada's Curse, and then Chapter 4 again. I can't believe I would let a screw-up like that escape my vigilance, but it happens. I'm not a professional editor. Yes, Imprisoned, Chapter 5, even though it says 4, and we'll get to that also. So let's begin right now. The plan was working. Several weeks later, sitting in a Bazz cafe with her atmospheric slave, doing her best to avoid the terribly hot local cuisine, she caught wind from the ballwigs that Lord Stenstrom was on his way to Bazz personally to fetch the God Sperm potion, which she was going to make certain that he did not receive. Instead, he would get the Bazz love potion, and that would be that. All she had to do was wait until he arrived and monitor the transaction to ensure he took the potion that she wanted him to take. She sat at a nearby cafe and watched. Trying to blend in, she dismissed her atmospheric and fanned herself at her table, trying to keep cool without much success. And it couldn't happen fast enough. She'd had her fill of Bazz, and with Bazzers in general, is ready to return to civilized Cana as soon as possible. The local, pesky, sweaty people leeching spices from their pores and growing hair in places where hair ought not to grow. She couldn't walk down a street or take a meal without vendors and self-styled mystics harassing her the entire way. She had come to Bazz to blend in and hide. However, her fair complexion and her use of an atmospheric fingered her as a Canaan lady of means, and the Bazzers gave her no peace. The worst of the lot were these strange, loud women prowling the cafes and wharfs wearing gypsy garments. They called themselves Ganaadas and claimed to possess mystical powers. With no shame and little tact, the Ganaadas would approach and demand she secure their services, waving their depleted cred sticks. In her face, "You got a bad flow about you," the Ganaada would say. "I can fix. Just cost you 1,500 creds." Though Lady Vendra tried to be respectful of women and promote their success as she was taught on Carina, these Bazz females were intolerable. They were noisy, they were hairy, they stank, and they seemed to gravitate to her, peering through crystals and other totems and babbling about a bad flow around her. A lot of Bazz nonsense. And as the Ganaadas were female, she had nothing in her bag of tricks to combat or control them as she could with males. She simply had to sit there and endure them. She watched Lord Stenstrom sweating in his fleet uniform. He had arrived in the square a bit early. She hadn't been expecting him until the morrow, and the pharmacy was closed. He made his way to a small inn on the other side of the square and stood at the counter, hoping to rent an air-conditioned room to pass the time. This was the moment to strike. There he was, alone, unsuspecting and vulnerable, and she was running out of patience. In her jaded observations of Bazz, she learned that Bazzers were always assaulting each other and having minor scuffles in the street. Nobody paid any attention. If she were to walk over there and assault him in plain sight, nobody would pay it any mind or come to his aid. She pushed out her chair and made her way across the square. Time to take Lord Belmont one way or the other. Why wait? Why linger on this barbaric hellhole any longer than necessary? By sundown, she would be returning to blessed Cana, arm in arm with Lord Stenstrom at last. As she neared the center of the square, a heated scuffle broke out in front of her. A grotesque Ganaada and some little black-haired girl urchin were going at it, clawing at each other, ripping clothing and throwing each other about, their two heads of black hair and tassels bobbing around and whirling in concentric circles. Unseemly fights were always breaking out on the streets of Bazz, as she noted. But this particular fight was inconvenient. The two were going at it hard, literally ripping each other's clothing off. Shoes flew. Nobody paid them much mind until somebody started waving a cred stick around, hoping to take wagers on the fight. Interest quickly peaked. A circle of people formed to bet money and watch as the girl and the Ganaada rolled around with unskilled fury. People cheered as blows were landed, and as one combatant got the upper hand only to lose it moments later. Vendra had to push her way through the crush of noisy people, and it was slow going. When she got through to the inn, Lord Stenstrom was gone, her opportunity lost. She felt hot and tired and returned to her seat at the cafe and ordered a drink. Frustrated, she would wait for her scheme to unfold as planned. What was another steaming day on Bazz? The problem with Bazz, aside from the heat, was Bazzers. The next day, she was back in her seat at the cafe as she waited for Lord Stenstrom to arrive at the pharmacy. Soon, A Ganaada came up to her table and became particularly forceful and rude, giving her no peace, demanding money. She noted the Ganaada's face was marked up and bruised. She recognized her hideous clothing. This was the Ganaada whose ill-timed fight had foiled her attempt to get at Lord Stenstrom the day before. She wanted her to hurt, to feel real pain. Vendra was hot and irritable and had had enough. She stood up and dragged the foul woman out of the cafe and into an alley, where she proceeded to beat her. The Ganaada fought back with surprising tenacity, and Lady Vendra found herself in a heated and rather desperate brawl. Her skills were too much. She punished the foul woman and laid her out, hitting her where it hurt most, leaving her in a pile of rubbish. She brushed herself off and headed back to the cafe. The Ganaada stirred. "I curse you," she mumbled from behind, half insensate in the trash. "I curse you to the circle." "Fine. Whatever. Savage from Bazz. Lay there in the trash and lick your wounds and be thankful you're not dead." She returned to her seat at the cafe and ordered a refreshment. As she awaited for it to arrive, she felt a sly hand slide into her pocket. Whirling around, she caught a small black-haired girl, whom she recognized as one of the pharmacist's worthless nieces, trying to steal her purse. She was in a filthy state, torn clothes and with a black eye. Vendra first thought to break her arm and send her off crying. Such was the state of her mood, but instead she smiled and opened her purse, giving her a few coins. She patted her on the head. "Off you go," she said, and the girl, with her ridiculous molics, scurried away. Hopeless urchin, she thought. What good would she ever be? It should be any time now. The afternoon seemed odd. The frequent Ganaadas roaming the street gave her a wide berth. They must have heard how she gave a beating to one of their own and wanted nothing further to do with her, giving her only sideways glances. One of them made an odd sort of gesture toward her, joining her thumb and forefinger together, forming a crude circle, and then she scampered away. At last, her patience bore fruit. There was Stenstrom emerging from the inn, no doubt miserable in his hot fleet coat. She watched as he crossed the square, approached the pharmacy, and entered. "Stenstrom, all of this is for you." Inside, she had marked a bottle of tincture the pharmacist was to sell Lord Stenstrom, one that was full of love potion laced with her pheromones. She wasn't going to take a chance. Lord Stenstrom thought he was purchasing the god sperm tincture. Instead, he would be getting nothing but the love potion. Smiling, Lord Stenstrom left with his purchase and took his leave. Whatever happened to the love potion after that, she did not know, for Lord Stenstrom never came calling for her, as the pharmacist promised he would. Something happened somehow. Lord Stenstrom didn't get the love potion, or it got mixed into the god sperm tincture by mistake. How could this be? She'd labored for this opportunity, and she stormed into the pharmacy and grilled the pharmacist for information. He told her the day Lord Stenstrom came to buy his tincture, one of his nieces had tried to steal something from the store before he arrived, and in catching her they made a mess, spilling and knocking over bottles all over the place. That must have been what happened. The bottles were fouled, and therefore, who knows what Lord Stenstrom took. Good creation, these Bazz savages. If only she could kill them all. In frustration, she murdered him in a slow, humiliating session, making him suffer for hours, and then burned his pharmacy to the ground. She then murdered her atmospheric slave and departed Bazz, vowing that if she ever returned, it would be to face the devil himself. 2 years later, Lord Stenstrom the Younger of Belmont, South Tyrol, was born after a difficult pregnancy that was nearly the end of his hated mother. Though the love potion had been a miserable failure, the tincture he took had been a raging success, as shown by the end result. Finally, after 80-plus years, the House of Belmont South Tyrol had its heir. And now, Lady Vendra had her prime target, this brand new baby boy. Her revenge would take full flight against Lady Jubilee's son. She decided to thoroughly terrify Lady Jubilee with several harassing attempts on his life, using an array of hastily acquired and disposable slaves. She sent them out to the Belmont South Tyrol grounds, and many times they never returned. She did the obvious things, placing a deadly wasp into his nursery, attempting a few intentionally ham-fisted abductions just to make Jubilee sweat. On a lark, she tried a ploy where she had her slaves place a steel animal trap from Bazz in his play area, which apparently failed miserably, for nothing came of it. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 4, The Ganaada's Curse. There you have it. We see the genesis of the Bazz Circle curse. Lady Vendra, sick and tired of the Ganaadas harassing her for cash and trying to tell her fortune and whatnot, dragged one of them into an alley, beat her senseless, and as she departed, her beaten foe, the Ganaada cursed her. He says, "I curse you to the circle." And she's like, whatever, who cares? It's Bazz stupidity. But is it? Instantly, the other Ganaadas reacted to her badly, giving her space, making circle gestures with their hands. They were detecting something on her had taken root and was growing. The Bazz curse. Or from then until now, that curse has been active and it's been growing, sucking in any with even a passing association with Lady Vendra. And as we knew from Lord Aram's discourse earlier on, Private Tara was active in this chapter. She is the one who got into the big fight with the Ganaada in the city square, as Lady Vendra, sick and tired of Bazz, hot, miserable, sees Lord Stenstrom across the square and decides, I'm not going to fool around with all this love potion nastiness. I'm just going to go over there and take him using my gynologist skills. She gets up to go get him, but then Tara and this Ganaada get into a big brawl that clogged her way to him across the square. People started betting on what was going on. By the time she made her way across the square to the inn, he was gone. Plot foiled. And then Tara tried to pick her pocket, and she grabbed her arm and bent it back and gave her some coins, and she trotted off. And then Tara, trying to get relief because her arm was hurt by the lady in gray bending her arm back, went to her uncle's pharmacy trying to steal some painkiller. He caught her. They made a mess. And then we know what happened there, that Lord Stenstrom came for his Godsperm potion, and he got it, and some other things that we'll never know exactly what he took. He didn't get the love potion that she had been laboring for him to take. One scented with her pheromones. In frustration, she killed the pharmacist, and then killed her atmospheric, and then burned his flippin' pharmacy to the ground. We see all this stuff happening on Bazz. We now move to Chapter 5, Imprisoned, even though it says 4 in the book, and this is pissing me off more with each passing second. How do these things happen? How do they happen? But they do. They do. Oh, God help me, they do. Yes. Anywho, yeah, and as a stickler for perfection, this just drives me crazy. It does. I'll get past it, I'm certain. So let's proceed. This next chapter here is only a few pages long, and then we'll be done for the evening. Lady Vendra lost a bit of her mind as time went on. She became rather curious about this baby boy born to the House of Belmont. For reasons she couldn't understand, he dominated her thoughts. She wanted to see him, to look him in the eye, though she wasn't certain why, and disguising herself, she went to Tyrol and waited, biding her time, as always. There was Lady Jubilee one day pushing a stroller with two of her daughters. One of the daughters, a slightly chubby one, wanted something from a stand, and Lady Jubilee turned for a moment to get it for her, and Lady Vendra struck. In a flash, she had the boy and was off. Quickly, she took him to the waterfront to drop him into the sea. After all, there were no innocent bystanders in revenge, right? It would be perfect. Perfect! Lady Jubilee could have no more children after his difficult birth. So she had heard. Not only would she be killing the boy and putting a knife into Jubilee's heart, she would be putting an end to the Belmont South Tyrol line as well. She had only to drop him in. Her revenge was finally at hand. Now was the time. This was the moment. The decades of waiting. She looked at him. That perfect little face, bright eyes, a tiny baby smile. How he looked. Like Lord Stenstrom. She forgot all about the last century of revenge. She forgot about Lady Jubilee and Carina and the sordid entanglements of revenge. She forgot about her rage and all the souls who had died at her hands. She forgot about the third tenant, failure to act. She knew that not doing what needed to be done at this perfect moment, after so much time and planning, could be the death of her. But for a fleeting moment, she sat by the water with the infant, just like a new mother would with her son. And she held him, humming slightly. Just for a few moments, she discovered what it was like to live the life of a simple mother, to feel the joy that went along with it. What happened after that was a blur, a clouded rupture of movement. Something came at her and hit her full in the face. Everything went black, and she had no idea what was happening. There was a storm raging all around. She heard voices, could feel eyes staring, and then it became clear. The sisters, they had her. The vice around her was tormenting and unendurable. She fell back into her Carina training to pretend to submit in the face of an insurmountable enemy, feign weakness and show fear. Let them think you are beaten. Let them think they are in control. Please, please stop. I die. What do you want? She cried. You attempted to kill the son of Belmont South Tyrol and are in violation of your long-standing weregild. Thus, you are our prisoner and out of the League's eye. We have questions for you. I'll answer anything. Anything. You recently attempted to poison your enemy, Lady Jubilee of Belmont South Tyrol. We care not why you wish her dead. That is your concern. We want to know what additive you used in the poisoning. We demand it. Lady Jubilee? Poison? She hadn't tried to poison Lady Jubilee. There was the fiasco with the Godsperm tincture and the love potion on Bazz, but that was all. Why were the sisters so interested in that? The vice tightened. She felt her life and her sanity ripping apart. Simply tell us what you used, and this can end. You shall be sent home, free and goodly. We shall even kill Lady Jubilee of Belmont South Tyrol for you. We shall take care of everything. Simply tell us what you used. Kill Lady Jubilee? No. No! This is between me and her. She is mine. Mine! She babbled in torment. I don't want her dead. I want her on her knees, wailing for death. I want her kneeling at the gravesite of her son. You are in a position to demand nothing. Tell us what we want to know. Somewhere deep within, her resolve formed again, bubbled up, and built a wall around her. Despite her training, She was defiant. She would not be meek. "Lady Jubilee is mine! I will tell you nothing." "Tell us!" And her torment began. For years, her hatred sustaining her through the ordeal. After an unknown length of time, her tormentors became unsure, their arrogance faltering. Has she revealed her secret? She has not. Time is of the essence. We cannot hold her forever. She must be returned unmarked and whole. She will not reveal unto us her secret. We must know what she used. The ex-commons has heard the arguments of her kin and desire her release. Let them be damned. We cannot go against the ruling of the ex-commons. We will extract her secret and then release her, whole and unharmed. And they came at her again, doling out pain, shouting threats. She, however, rode the torrent out. Let them prod and scratch. Let them wail. She laughed. She clutched her cloak about her now frail body as she rode in the coach, her family all around her, concerned and supportive. The hills rolled by. It had been years since she'd seen these hills, but she knew every one of them. Soon, the Cone Manor appeared in the distance. She was home. Her health was shattered and her body somewhat bent, yet she had won. Pampered and caressed in riches, she recovered from her ordeal quickly. In the familiar confines of her home, the sisters. She hated the sisters for their cruel embrace, for stripping her bare, for hollowing her mind into a cesspool of vapor and applying agony to her flesh. She was now going to return them the favor. She was going to apply the brand to their flesh as they had done to hers. There was room in her soul for all things she hated. There was room aplenty, and she had learned much during her pain captivity. Her tormentors, aloof in their arrogance, allowed their thoughts to be heard. A name kept popping up. The It Man. The It Man had returned, and he was everything to them. The It Man. What was that? Who is that? Everybody, it seemed, had a hero. Everybody had someone whom they looked up to, and for the sisters, the It Man was that somebody. It took her a while to piece it together, but eventually a picture formed. There was not one, but two It Men running about. One was mature and in service of the sisterhood. The second was new, a work in progress, a happy surprise that almost slipped through their fingers. She wasn't clear on who the second It Man was. His identity was a secret the sisters kept well. The first It Man, however, she discovered fairly quickly. Terence, the Mad Lord of Walther. The Mad Lord of Walther. The man who destroyed her lair under Woodward. The man who nearly got her in Calvert years before. Coming up from her social circles, she knew the sisters publicly disdained Lord Terence of Walter for his bravado and for his vigilance. They mocked and belittled his exploits. But look, behind the scenes, it was quite a different story. Terence, their beloved Terence, how they secretly worship him, drew strength from him. Again, as was with the barb, and with other things, the sisters had a tendency to disdain a thing in public, while embracing it in private. Yes, of course, outwardly mocking him, yet secretly controlling his actions. It was a classic ploy, worthy of the Doms of Carina themselves. So, the Mad Lord is their beloved It Man, is he? It made perfect sense. If she could inflict great pain upon the It Man, then she would inflict great pain on the sisterhood. And even better, she could have revenge for being bested by him and Calvert. Yes, therefore the It Man, the Mad Lord of Walther, was doomed. But how? How to go about it? As she knew firsthand, the Mad Lord demonstrated great strength, speed, endurance, and resistance to damage, and he easily defeated her even when she was at her fighting best in Calvert. Looking at her now, she was a wrecked, frail woman huddled up under a blanket in the warm Remnath climate, a distant shadow of what she once was. Nevertheless, he was doomed. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 4 again, or 5, whatever you want to call it, because the next chapter is Chapter 5. How could I fuck this up so hard? I'm just pissed. Anyways, the Lady Vendra decides upon the birth of Lady Jubilee's son, Lord Stenstrom the Younger, that he was going to become the focus of her revenge for a lot of reasons. Because he was their only son, he was the heir to the Belmont South Tyrol fortune, and his presence secured their finances so that all his sisters wouldn't have to worry about being disenfranchised. Their brother, the 30th of the Belmont South Tyrol line, would ensure that. And also, she had heard the pregnancy was hell, that Lady Jubilee can no longer have children after that. So, if she were to take him out, she'd be killing her son, and she would also be killing the Belmont house itself, as there would be no more heirs. Biding her time as always. In disguise, she one day saw Lady Jubilee pushing a stroller with her son in it, and there were two of his sisters with her, and usually, as usual, it's Lyra and Virginia. Virginia wanted something from a vendor, and Lady Jubilee turned to get it. That's when Vendra struck, and she abducted Lord Stenstrom from his stroller and wafted away, and she immediately went to the docks and was ready to plunge a little tyke in. And this would be it. This was her moment for revenge. This was the moment to strike at the heart and the flesh, and her revenge would be complete. But as was seen much later in Fox Park, Lady Vendra has a soft spot for Lord Stenstrom a little bit. When she's in his presence, he discombobulates her. Looking at him, at his little cute chubby face, she sees his father in him, and she sees how cute he is, and just for a moment she revels in what it would be like to be a mother, just to enjoy an outing with her son by the dock, and she allows herself to become overwhelmed with that thought just for a few moments. And of course, the third Carine tenet of revenge is failure to act. When the time is ripe, when all your planning comes into fruition, you have to strike. You have to take your revenge. If you don't, that could lead to your doom. This was the moment. She could have killed Lord Stenstrom and killed, in essence, Lady Jubilee and the House of Belmont South Tower, and she didn't do it. And that could be her doom. That's not me saying, well, it is me saying it, but it's not me saying it. It's what the Carinans say. That's their tenets of revenge. You plan for years. When the moment comes, you better take it. Because if you don't, that's it for you. She didn't take it. And the sisters, having discovered that Lord Stenstrom is a manufactured It Man, was keen to know just what that process was, so that if they can create an It Man whenever they want one, they wouldn't have to fool about with all this genetics and bloodlines and mating this house to that and waiting 1,000 years for another It guy to show up. No, they could just make one. They can just spit one out like a freaking Big Mac. They don't know what chemicals, what agents were used. This God sperm potion mixed with what? With chemical X. And so they capture Lady Vendra and take her to one of their strongholds, either Valenhelm, twilight for there's any number of ones that they could take her to, and they're fully justified in doing so because she violated the terms of her will guild by trying to kill the son of the House of Belmont South Tyrol when only revenge against Lady Jubilee herself was allowed. And they got her, and they start questioning her, like, hey, we don't give a toot about this house, and we don't give a toot about you or Lady Jubilee. We want to know what potions were involved in this. We want to know what chemicals you used to try to poison Lady Jubilee. They got their facts messed up a little bit. And Vendra, feigning fear just to ride out this session, says, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, well, listen, we want to know what you use. We'll even kill Lady Jubilee for you. We don't care. Just tell us what it was. And that set Vendra off. She became very defiant, and that led to years of torture and torment at the hands of the sisters. And eventually, her family petitioned the League Ex-Commons. Basically, it's the ruling body of the League, in theory. And they went to the sisters and said, you can't hold this lady forever. You gotta let her go. And they did. After a while, it's like, we don't know, but we're gonna figure this out sooner or later. Send her home. And she goes home, and she's a broken, bent woman. But she learned a lot of things using her Karina skills. She pierced the sisters' minds without them knowing it, and she learned about the presence of the It Man, Lord Terence of Walther, that the sisters just love the It Man. And this is the guy who messed her up in Calvert, so if she could take revenge on him, she'd be getting revenge for being defeated, and annoy the sisters as well. So it's a double bonus. So she's going to plan to take the Mad Lord down. She also discovers there's a second It Man running around, though she doesn't know who it is. She doesn't know that it's Lord Stenstrom the Younger. At this point, we're about halfway through part 2 of the book. Next week is chapter 5 or chapter 6. What's this saying? That's driving me just wiggy. Yeah, in the table of contents, it's chapter 6. But here it says chapter 5. I just effed this up. I was asleep at the switch. I don't know what happened. Next week, chapter 6, The Taking of Sedgwick of Cold. So, we're going to see Lady Vendra ramping up her efforts to take control of the Mad Lord of Walther. And as we saw in Rustum Labyrinth, way back in Book 1, in Part 2, Lady Vendra was working with the enemy of the Mad Lord of Walther, the pirate of Remnath, Lord Sedgwick of Cold. So next week we're going to see just how that happened, how Lady Vendra takes control of the enemy of the Mad Lord with the goal of taking down the Mad Lord himself. We will knock that out next week. And until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.